Okay, we'll call the regular meeting of council to order for February 8th, 2021 at 3 p.m. One very minor amendment to the agenda is just, I'm going to slide this into the public comment section, but just a couple of pieces on the on the coal policy announcement. Is that okay, Kara? Slide it in there. You don't care. I'm part of the public somehow anyway. So that's for a motion from Councillor Kinghorn. The council adopt the agenda for the regular council meeting February 8th, 2021 as presented.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will give you that motion.
Thanks.
Sorry,
Careful,
Mayor
careful,
Greg.
careful. Take. Better cancel being live right now for a minute, Ken. All in favor? Motion is carried. Consent agenda meeting minutes. Ask for a motion from Councillor McMillan that the following items be adopted by omnibus motion in accordance with council's procedure bylaw. Special council minutes, January 25th, regular council minutes, January 25th, special council minutes, January 27th, special council minutes, February 1st, and the strategic priorities chart.
I will give you that motion. I do have a question about the strategic priorities chart though.
Yep.
So a citizen actually had a very valid comment regarding the number one, the long-term water strategy execute agreement with having the date January 21st. I thought the citizen had a valid point when she said, well, Carol, that actually looks like it's already been executed. So I was just wondering if it could just be updated to be like in progress or something so that people, because I did have a couple of questions from people just thinking that the water agreement had been executed without public knowledge. Does that sound fair?
Usually, Councillor McMillan, through Mayor Snodgrass, usually we'll update that when we have our quarterly meeting. The dates are just guidelines from that perspective.
Oh, I understand, Chris. It's just I thought this person had a very valid point because she's reading this as she's watching the meeting. And I thought, you know what? That's a fair enough assessment because from the perspective from the citizen.
Okay.
Update that, Chris.
I'll take a look.
Thank you. And I'll give you that motion, Mayor Snodgrass.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Public comments. Kara, is there anything outside of my own? Okay. So I apologize for that. The committee of the whole meeting, when Jamie made his comment there, I was answering an email to a reporter. So I didn't really see him, but I phoned him afterwards. So as far as the kudos that were given to me on the coal issue, and it's a huge win today, there's no question, but I can't do these things without you guys. And I'll tell you right up, with talking with the other lots of other mayors and councillors and stuff across Alberta and outside of this province, I got the best council in Canada. There is just no question. So this stuff is really easy, and lots of guys are just blown away that we're doing this stuff and getting a 7-0 unanimous motions to be sticking our nose into a conversation as big as the coal thing is, but it absolutely affects everybody in this province. So, but the win today was not because of myself or Kevin Van Teegem or David Luff or Laura and John or Mac and Rennie. It wasn't because of any one set of individuals. It's because of Albertans. And this crossed party lines. This wasn't NDP versus UCP stuff. This was none of that. This was just Albertans that are making it very clear as to how we see this resource being developed in the future. And you know, it's contrary to Premier Kenney, this is not an urban rural discussion, sir. That man needs to get caught up on this issue if he's going to chime in on it at all. But This was an Albertan issue, and Albertans spoke up, and Albertans got done today what happened. So that being said, now that we are all educated in the way we are on this coal discussion, the end goal has changed. It started with getting the policy reinstated and everything, and that's still extremely important right now. But the goal has changed, and Albertans are being very, very clear that they do not want to see mountaintop removal, surface mining, strip mining, open pit, put whatever name on it you want. They don't want it, and that's going to be the critical piece going forward with how this public consultation goes. So I have already been contacted by staff within Minister Savage's office. Got off the phone about a half an hour after the announcement came and wanted my initial reaction, but also wanted to know where I fit in with the public consultation thing and would I be available for them to get feedback on. I said, yes, absolutely. But there's a couple other people that I want in those meetings as well that know a lot about this kind of stuff more than I do. But so there's a lot of work to do yet. There's a lot of questions surrounding the town of High Rivers ask on the stop work order. That I do understand is not an easy one for the government to deal with because it's an AER decision. But the minister does have options of stepping in on that and absolutely can provide ministerial orders to get that done. The problem with that for the government is that it would cost payouts, I'm sure, on those permits. Could also result in lawsuits from the coal companies. So, you know, doing this creates a lot of instability in those projects right now. And it's kind of up to those coal companies whether they think it's a good idea to fire back up in the spring with their exploration or not. So I got a lot of questions on that. And as an Alberta taxpayer, with the money, the amount of $8 billion that we spent, our premier spent on a roll of the dice with the Keystone project. If it cost us a couple $100 million even to get out of this coal exploration, I suggest signing the check and let's be done with it and go. But we'll see how that all plays out. But what I wanted to say is just because that announcement came out today does not end the discussion. It just gives us a reset, gives us some breathing space so that we can put a proper plan together now, moving forward to get feedback from Albertans and see what a proper plan looks like in this province. But I can't thank the six of you enough and all of our staff and everybody that supported us going through this and getting all the letters sent out to all the municipalities and everything. This thing has been moving at light speed, and I'm going to keep my foot to the floor on it to keep these guys moving so that it doesn't lax the efforts that everybody's put into it. So hell of a job, everybody. We're moving on, and we got a big part of this done today. So we'll continue on. Kudos. Delegations. So we've got Julia from Daydreams here with us. Can you bring her in, Kara?
Yep, she's on her way.
Hello.
Hi, Julia.
Hello.
Do you have video or just audio today?
I have
There
video.
you go. We got you.
Okay.
Perfect. The floor is yours, Julia. Go ahead.
I actually was taking this opportunity to, is my microphone on? Okay. Just taking the opportunity to, I was hoping that the counselors and yourself had a chance to look at the USB that we had sent. It was with our PowerPoint on our center. What we were just wanting to do is provide information about our facility and what we're proposing with the provincial government. We've put an application in for a grant called Capacity Building, which allows us to not only enhance what's happening in High River and surrounding areas, but it would be evening care and overnight care. As you may or may not know as counselors, the Child Care Act was just changed as of February the 1st, and they are now allowing overnight care in facilities who meet the requirement, of course. So the capacity building would allow some of our parents that are in our center presently who are nurses, those that work in industries that are like Cargill, and those that are in that have to go to places like Calgary or further in order for their employment. When we did a survey in our center, we had a high return of parents that have given up jobs. Have given up jobs in their area or have had a cutting of hours. And they are asking that extended hour care would be an important thing. That would also include Saturdays, by the way. So anyway, I was hoping that everybody got a chance to look at the USB and maybe would ask me some questions so I could answer. Anybody?
Perfect. Thanks, Julia. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you very much, Mayor Snodgrass, and thank you so much for your presentation, Julia. I think it's just a wonderful opportunity that you're able to help out families in need, because with the requirement for 24-hour care, because there's so many families that they don't have the traditional 9 to 5 working. And I have to say that your PowerPoint, I was really impressed with just the warmth and the inviting atmosphere in your classrooms. And I know because I walk by your site all the time and I see the kids outside with, you have some very, very responsible staff, because I've watched them interact with the kids, and it's just so respectful and they look so happy. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to say, or?
Any other questions from council? Councillor Masterman.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. So I noticed, Julia, that you did ask for a letter of endorsement as well.
Yes.
I think I'll have to ask direction of Kara here, although what you're here to talk about is a nonprofit part of your business. I believe you are a business. And we just, I don't know if anybody explained this to you, but we did just approve a policy in which we decided not to write any letters of support to businesses. So I stand to be corrected by Chris or Kara or anybody, but that's just my take on it. I just wanted to check with you on that.
Okay.
Kara?
So thank you, Councillor Masterman. What Nicole and I reviewed this application as it came in, and it was our understanding that this was a nonprofit asking for this, not the business side of it. And so I guess I'll have to defer to Julia to maybe provide a little bit more clarity on how exactly that would work.
So it is a nonprofit. I'm the executive director. I do have a business side of it, which is the out of school program, which is in High River United Church and Spitzy when we're allowed to be in Spitzy. That is our out of school program. This is a totally separate business or a totally separate component. It's the capacity building is not available for, unfortunately, for the out of school programs at this time. So this grant that we're proposing, and what we're looking for, and maybe I need to give more clarity, is we are just wanting a letter that says, that we are a center, and I know that Mayor Snodgrass knows probably about our business a little bit more, but Mr. Kinghorn, I believe. I don't know all the councillors recently, but we have been around since 2006, have been accredited center, have been licensed, and we've continually expanded to provide that quality of service in this community, so that always we were looking for the children. I think that we're looking, this is the first time we've asked actually for this. we're looking not for an endorsement of what we do so much as to just recognize that we are here and that we're continually looking at what the community needs. And our focus has always been from 2006 up is to attract other businesses and families to come and live in High River. Without the support services of a good quality educational early learning program, you will not attract okay, let's back up a bit. You will attract, but maybe not as many people as we would like. People are looking, families are looking, young families are looking for services that are going to support them while they're working. And even if they're working in Calgary, that they live here in our community and provide to the tax base. I think we've shown over the years that I've invested in this community for sure with our commercial building, that we're here to stay and that we continually put forward that message to people in our community. Come here, live here, build up our tax base, right? Make a healthy town. And young children and families, that's what we're looking for. So I think maybe an endorsement letter is probably a little scary for you as counselors. And I understand that. We're looking more to say a support, maybe it's a support letter, just saying, we know you're here. We understand. We also know that you've been a business, if you look at our record, as very high quality, well respected in the community. And certainly that we are, from a tax-based scenario, we've continually paid our bills and not shorted on that. So I don't know what else I can say.
So Julia, is this like the letter of support? Is that going to be, is that something that, just so that the wording is what we need it to, what you need it to be, is it going to be used for grant applications? Is that what the intention of it would be for?
It could be, or it could just be something we have when, typically when, whether you're doing accreditation or licensing or any of those kind of things, it's just a letter saying they know, and you're in a member of good standing. I guess that would be a form that I would use.
Okay.
And that's what we're looking for. Just a member of good standing, been a member of the chamber, which obviously that's a different sector from you, but just, we've always had a good relationship. There hasn't been anything in our, anything to do with the town that has been negative. We've just been a member of good standing as a business here. I don't know if I'm explaining correctly.
No, you did. That clears it up 100% for me. So, Kara, can we put this on to kind of the next council agenda? Maybe have some wording ready for us for some kind of support letter, as long as, like Bruce was saying, very good comment that we're dealing with a nonprofit here. So, is that fair?
So it's actually later on down the agenda.
Oh,
We've already got the draft wording from Julia. We did ask her to submit that in accordance with the policy. And so it is further on down the agenda.
I'll read the agenda now. Forgot about that chunk. Okay, thanks very much. We're good.
Okay.
Thanks, Julia.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Community Vitality Fund recommendation. Who's speaking to that one? Janelle, obviously.
We've got Angela coming in from CVAC.
Oh, okay.
And maybe as she comes in, I'll just do a quick introduction of her. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Angela Caldwell has been a very valuable member of our Community Vitality Advisory Committee. And at our last meeting, she so graciously accepted the nomination to be chair. So we're very excited to have her as our newly appointed chair, and she'll speak to the recommendation this afternoon.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, a little bit of kind of funness. Hi, everyone. So we had kind of an exciting application put forth. I know you guys didn't get a lot of information, so I'm just going to give a quick kind of rundown of it. So the High River Gift of Music submitted an application in the amount of $6,000 to help fund a drive-in music concert. So this is going to happen on Saturday, February 20th, and they're going to call it, well, I guess it's already called the Luminous Voices Drive-In Concert. The professional chamber choir is going to broadcast from each of their vehicles in the high school parking lot. So people will be able to bring their vehicles in. I think it costs $25 a car to get there. And the music will be broadcast over FM frequency that the people who are in attendance can hear. So I guess it's kind of a cool way to listen to the music. So it's kind of an exciting new thing that's happening in High River, right? So, and they assured us that this has been confirmed with AHS, that everything's good and all the protocols have been followed to that respect. So our committee, of course, has to kind of make sure it coincides with the criteria. And everybody in our committee had really positive feedback about this application. We all agreed that it not only complies with this criteria, but it's progressive and exciting way to bring this community together with all of the craziness that is going on in the world. So it was approved by every member in our committee. So we had no negative things to say about it. So of course, then CVAC recommends or asks that the council give the High River Gift of Music the $6,000 from our CVAC fund for the Luminous Voices Drive-In Concert. Do you guys have any questions?
Bruce, thanks, Angela.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Snodgrass, and thank you, Angela, for the presentation and for taking on the chair role at CVAC as well. That's great for CVAC. You've been part of that for a long time, and it's nice to have your experience and leadership ability leading that. I did want to just point out too that this was the first application that CVAC had considered since February of 2020, and hadn't met since then. And so we met virtually last week or a couple of weeks ago, and Joanne Van Donzel and Angie Brown came on as new members as well that night. But this was I'm not sure I've ever seen the committee so adamantly unanimous in its support of an application. And I think as Angie said, Angela said, there's just so much that's been happening that a chance to be at a concert like this, even in your car and listening on the radio while it's happening in front of you, is just tremendous. So I just wanted to say thanks to Angie for the presentation and the recommendation.
Thanks, Bruce. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you very much. And congratulations, Angela, on becoming the chair. You'll do an awesome job.
Thank you.
I was really happy to see this because when I volunteered for the Gift of Music Society, I just love their innovative ideas and creativity and how to bring such great music into High River. And I'm not sure if any of you were able to participate in their pop-up cello concerts throughout the community in the summer, but just tremendous innovation. And so I'm giving a shout out to this wonderful group of dedicated volunteers. And of course, Michelle is the paid artistic director, but she is just we are so blessed to have this group, because when I used to take tickets at the door, it was so wonderful to hear how many people were even coming from Northwest Calgary in the worst snowstorms possible, raving about the great restaurants we have in town, as well as the wonderful music. So I think the Luminous Voices Drive-In Concert will be really a great spirit builder for our community, and that's just wonderful. So thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Michael?
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. Thanks for the presentation, Angie. Appreciate it. Now, again, to reiterate what everybody else is really saying, wonderful that we can have something going on in our community that people can participate and enjoy. We need some of that nowadays. I'm just going to be a little bit technical. The Gift of Music Society is still in process of the application, right? Like, it doesn't sound like there's going to be any problems, but if there's an issue, the mechanism would be that the money would not go to the society then because the event wouldn't go on. And I'm not hoping that that happens at all. I'm sure it's just a technicality and AHS is going to sign off on it and everybody's going to have a great time. But just from the, I guess, the fiduciary side of things to look after funds if something untoward was to happen. Thank you.
So I can speak to that a little bit. We always have, when funding transfers hands, anybody who has been in receipt of community vitality funds enters into an agreement. And part of that agreement is if something was to disrupt the project or the event that was being funded, that money would be expected to be returned to the community vitality fund.
Thanks much. That's what I thought.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass, and hello, Angela. We see you everywhere. You're such a great volunteer in our community. So again, I just wanted to thank you for the presentation and congratulate you on being chairman of yet another board. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Todd.
That's it for questions. Thanks very much, Angela. Much
Thank you,
appreciated.
everyone.
Good luck being chair. It's always a joy, isn't it?
Oh, yes, always. Have a good day, everyone. Stay warm.
You too. Ask for a motion from Councillor Masterman that council award the High River Gift of Music Society $6,000 from the Community Vitality Fund to support the 2021 Luminous Voices Drive-In Concert.
Yeah, I'm happy to give that motion. Mayor Snodgrass, thank you.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Thanks very much. Thanks again,
Thank you.
Angela. Take care.
Bye.
Off-site levies bylaw. Kaylee.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Today, I am bringing forward bylaw 4586-2020, the offsite levies bylaw. We did have a public hearing in January and received some comments during that public hearing. So I will provide some clarity on some of the comments that were provided during the public hearing, and then I will open up the floor to questions. One of the major comments that was coming back consistently between our council and our developers was the question around 50,000 population. I do want to, I guess, bring clarity to this topic. The 25-year horizon, which is what the bylaw here is projecting to, is actually a population of 27,318. So I think there was some misunderstanding maybe that where that 50,000 came from. It's definitely from past reports, but as we look at this report and how we're determining projects and how we're determining growth, it's around that 25 or that 27,000 and change population. We did take a look at our actual growth that has taken place in the past and looking back to 1990, so that we're able to have that nice broad range of review of our population growth, because we are, again, trying to project very far into the future. If we took a look at our rates of growth and we applied the same rate all the way from 1990 all the way up to today's population, we would have seen probably a growth of just over 3% year to year. And actually, when we take a look at our population that we're projecting out 25 years, we're looking at just over 2% applied year after year. So we are looking at a more conservative growth rate. The one thing that's really important to remember, it's really hard for us to project growth. And so what's really important about this bylaw is that we are supposed to be reviewing it every 3 to 5 years so that we are able to take a look at what has actually taken place in growth and what we're seeing coming forward in the future, so that we are able to realign should realignment needs to take place. The next piece that did bring forward some conversation was the some of the options that were brought forward by the developers during our workshop. One of them being how often we're going to be reviewing, and so we brought some clarity around that. You know, between 3 to 5 years is what's recommended by the MGA. Of course, we did discuss a little bit around how that would take place with council changes. But again, it's really important to note that we are doing that every 3 to 5 years so that we are able to kind of realign and make sure that we got the right projects on the list. Timing of collection was another component. Offsite levies can sometimes be a very large portion of a project when signing these agreements. And so we did speak to coming up with a more consistent process of putting in a payment process of 10% upon signing, 45% after the first year, and another 45% after the second year. And the reason why we're speaking more to this is we've used multiple types of models in the past to defer payments. And so that can be challenging as to which one we're trying to follow, which process we're trying to follow with each of the different development agreements. I know that one of the options that was brought forward was a per lot sale basis. Unfortunately, we have tried that one in the past. It is very time consuming because then it is left to town staff to, I guess, monitor the sale of each of the lots within these developments. So it can be very time consuming on staff levels, and ensuring that we're not missing any of those lot sales. Another piece to that deferral payment is we are trying to match it with our development agreements that we have in place right now. So our development agreement does really speak to completing your work within that agreement within that 2-year span. And so by aligning our payment process, we're now aligning 2 processes together, which makes it a seamless process to follow within the organization internally with our staff. Also, the benefit of getting these sizes of developments down to these 2 years, it does provide us like the ability to get the developments completed in a reasonable amount of time. And so this has impact on our residents that are living within these developments that are growing in these greenfield developments, right? So a really good example is sometimes Toplift. When we have some developments that are really spanning 5, 10, 15 years, we do see that there is some complaints or, I guess, level of service questions coming around not having that Toplift in there. And sometimes that is because some of our developments are so much larger. And yes, there are some economic pieces that do play into that. So really trying to get these developments down to a reasonable size and a reasonable time frame so that we're providing a product to our town and an appropriate growth to our town. Another piece that was discussed was what was going to be our cutoff. How far do we really want to plan these projects out? And so again, we did choose that 25-year. So yes, it is a much larger picture of when we're taking a look at population, and that's very difficult to determine. But that within that 25 years, depending on what growth may or may not be, it does give us the ability to be somewhat for planning for the future so that we're not in a position where we're trying to get caught up as all of a sudden growth took place and we never anticipate some of these projects. So there is some importance around trying to plan for the future. And another piece that was brought forward was the use of grants on a lot of these projects. There has been much discussion on this. However, we're currently trying to work with us relying a lot less on these grants. And the problem with trying to project these grants for the future is we don't know which grants are going to be available to us. And so we try to keep the conversation of which grants are going to be applicable to these projects and how that's going to impact pricing, because we just don't know. And it's just an unknown that it's hard to plan for. So these were the main topics that were brought forward during the public hearing. Was there any further questions or was there any further clarity that council needed on these topics?
Kaylee, there was a couple of comments, especially from Dream Developments, comparing per hectare rates to other communities.
Yes, for sure.
Can you comment on kind of, not the, I guess the dangers of doing that, because it's often apples to oranges, right? So
Yeah, for sure. It's really difficult for us to compare apples to apples because the trouble is, so one will have different sizes of municipalities that we're comparing against. The other component is what is our age infrastructure compared to other age infrastructures within those communities? And so what does growth look like and what are the implications on that infrastructure? So that's another component. Another one is around what type of growth or development has the potential of taking place within those communities versus what could take place in our community. And so it's really hard. There's not really an apples to apples comparison out there when we're taking a look at even what infrastructure we have in place compared to what other municipalities have in place.
Yeah, and
Does that
especially,
answer?
yeah, absolutely. And especially with the changes the government has put into place, and lots of these communities have not updated their offsite levies to incorporate all this new stuff. So, you know, a community like Crossfield, I don't think has done that yet. So there's a number of projects that I'm sure will be in their new offsite levy bylaw that are not right now. So you're comparing dollar figures on projects that exist for us and do not exist for them. So not they don't exist, but they're in ours, they're not in theirs yet, right? So that's where I asked a lot of questions about that afterwards, and Chris helped clarify a lot of those boundaries to us, right?
And you're absolutely right. A lot of the changes that we're also trying to implement into this new bylaw are some of the changes that did come forward in the MGA. And so that may not have been seen across the board with other municipalities.
Exactly. You said it way better than I just did, as usual. Jamie.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I have a couple of questions for Kaylee. The first one is, and you mentioned this lightly, was about grants. Are we sort of doing this on the assumption that there are no grants coming for these projects?
That's hard. That's a hard one to, we aren't planning for grants. That's correct. We're
Okay.
trying to plan for planning within our own budgets.
So what happens if a grant does come? Say we charge offsite levies for, I don't know, fire hall. I know we can include that now in recplexes. And if we get a grant, a significant grant when we go to build it, how does that affect the offsite levies at that point then?
I'm actually going to defer this back to Chris because I know him and I had some conversations and I think he might be able to provide you the best clarity on that answer.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kaylee. So if a grant were to be applied for, let's use the wastewater treatment plant, for example. If we were to successfully get a grant, we would then be in the position to actually reduce the offsite levies through a bylaw amendment from that perspective. We would attribute how much is attributable directly to our current population and our current residents and what would be attributable to development from that perspective and make those adjustments accordingly. Would that be significant? It depends on the scope of the grant. If it's a 1/3 grant only, then it's not going to be a significant change, and that would be a decision council will have to make whether or not they want to update the bylaw or not.
So there is a mechanism in place that if granting happens, it'll be brought back.
Yeah, we'd have to, Councillor Kinghorn, if we were successful getting a grant, then we would be having that conversation with council strategically bring forward a bylaw amendment on that specific project to reduce that segment.
Awesome, thank you.
Councillor Cooey.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass, and thanks very much, Kaylee. I know this is a really large project, an onerous project, and there's been a lot of work put into it. So I appreciate everyone's time, staff, and the development community. Two questions. In the last public hearing, it was stated that 70% of the projects are being funded by offsite levies. I just want clarification. Is that an accurate number?
I guess so some of the projects are levied at 70% versus the town paying 30%. And those would be on the projects where if there is a benefit to the town, afterwards. So the driving factor is development, but the town does receive some benefit from those projects. That's where we would start to split it, where 70% of the cost of that project would go towards development and 30% would come back to the town. So an example would be if we ever need to make a new reservoir, for instance. We don't necessarily need a new reservoir, but if development pushed it where we needed to get to that point of having that new reservoir, they would be the driving factor for that project. So yeah, they would pay the 70%. However, there is a benefit that does fall upon the town when we have that extra reservoir. So of course we would have to put some contributions in there. And from my understanding, and I apologize, but I wasn't there for the conversation that took place after that workshop, but that was discussed on how the town wanted to split those projects 70-30 with development being the driving factor, however the town getting some benefit from those projects.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that clarification. You've talked a little bit about how the smaller subdivisions are more manageable, for the town. They're probably more manageable and desirable for the people living in those communities. And this may not be, this maybe isn't a fair question to you because you're not a developer, but do you also see this being a benefit to, I guess, is there a downfall to the smaller subdivision based from the development side? And again, if it's not a fair question, I appreciate it.
It is a difficult question. What I can say to the infrastructure component of it, sometimes having that infrastructure out there not being either fully used or completed, you'd start to have some deterioration on the infrastructure. For instance, their top lift. By not having that top lift out there in a reasonable amount of time and having that base layer of asphalt out there, it does start to break down. So we start to see issues where they're having to either rebuild it or there's a bunch of extra curb work or concrete work to be completed out there. And also there's a fair comment around the underground infrastructure too, when it's not being used at full capacity. But that's my understanding. Like when I'm still seeing it probably more from the town bias than from the developers. 100%.
Fair enough. No, thank you very much.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass, and thank you, Kaylee, for your work and for your presentation. I just, and you probably answered this, I'm just a little bit confused with new fee structure for new developments. When the offsite levy bylaw would be imposed. So is the ongoing developments right now as part of an ASP, will they be subject to the new fees right away as soon as the new bylaw, or is there any grandfathering or anything like that?
So the fees are calculated and applied to the subdivision development agreement at the time that the developer comes in and applies to do the subdivision and do construction. So when we're looking at all the SFITC, it's not necessarily saying that this is going to be the rate that's going to apply to all SFITC development. It's really going to be dependent on when the developers come forward to actually complete development. So this rate will only apply to any new agreements going forward.
Okay, great, thank you.
For sure.
Councillor McMillan.
Sorry, I had problems on meeting. Thank you very much, Mayor Snodgrass, and thank you very much, Kaylee, for your presentation. I guess I'm just feeling a little bit confused because I know at the public hearing, we weren't supposed to speak to it, and some of us did speak about our feelings. And I think what's really confusing me is I feel we're putting the cart before the horse, because when I read that we're going to have, we know that the town plan is being reviewed. It doesn't sit right with me that we're passing this particular bylaw before the town plan is being reviewed. And I am going to put the hat on about the developers as well. I think the developers that were at the public hearing all had very intelligent, insightful remarks. And I've been thinking a lot about it, that these are all developers that have actually, they've lasted the course in High River. And I know they don't have a choice, they've got the land they have to develop. But I just think, and maybe it's me, but being idealistic, but I don't understand why we wouldn't have the town plan review and then have stakeholders like the developers and even have their say in even the town plan component to have more of a potential buy-in. Because what I fear that will consistently happen every time there's an offsite levy bylaw coming forward, it's going to be the same kettle of fish where the developers don't feel like they're being heard and the town just whatever. And I just think a more collaborative approach. And I guess that's why, and I don't know how, I apologize that I'm not knowing my legislation, but when I look at council's options, the one that I'm favoring is number 4, because I just think, and with a little bit of addition, that the developers and, there's a lot of intelligence in the community where we can use their expertise. Like, I'm not a land developer, but I would really like to have their input, as well as the people who are into real estate in town. They know a lot more about, I guess I just want some feedback, because I really feel that it's the cart before the horse. When, if we had already done the town plan, but when we're on the cusp of reviewing that, I just feel that when we review the town plan, is it going to open up some other issues and it's going to be in contradiction to, so I'm open for feedback.
For sure. So one thing that I can talk to around the town plan and the offsite levy bylaws, the town plan is definitely a much more overreaching, larger document that doesn't get quite reviewed as often. It's a very large, long range plan for the town of High River. And definitely it's taken a look at it on a regular basis to make sure that we're in alignment and we're following what the overall goal of the town of High River is. And we use these as guiding documents when we are doing stuff, bylaws, for instance, like the offsite levy bylaw. However, the offsite levy bylaw takes it down to a much finer grain of what actually would need to take place. And that's where we are reviewing that on like I said, every 3 to 5 years, because really a lot can change in a few years. And you want to be able to realign and ensure that you're constantly on the same course and on the same path, versus we don't have that fine detail within a town plan. And so there's not really as much need to review the town plan to realign too much, because you're talking about much larger overarching goals. But I'll actually lean towards Chris for some further comment on that.
Thank you, Kaylee. Mayor Snodgrass, through you to Councillor McMillan. Fair comment, Councillor McMillan. And I think there's 2 approaches here. One, we take advantage of the opportunity that presents us now with the bylaws prepared, and as an interim measure, collect offsite levies until the town plan is being reviewed. We are hopeful, and I'll use the word hopeful, that the town planning process will be 18 months to 2 years. But that could be 18 months or 2 years that we have to recoup offsite levies through either utility rates to offset those infrastructure upgrades, or higher offsite levies at a later date. So, when we worked on preparing the options and talking through this as a team, that is certainly one of the options that, out of all of them, the 2 preferred ones from a staff perspective is adopted as it is, as a status quo, the bylaws as you see before us, get it in place, take advantage of the development opportunities that may be coming forward, or defeat the bylaw and wait until the town plan's over. That being said, there is some risk that the town plan may be longer than 18 months to 2 years. It could be 3 years, it could be 4 years. A new council could get sworn in and say, we're not going to proceed with a town plan. And those are the risks that we'd have to face. That being said, they could come in and say that they don't believe in a developer pay system as well, and that offsite levies are gone at the same time. So that was kind of the methodology, and our preference from a staff perspective is that we know that development's on the horizon. We know that there could be an uptick of development within the community. Getting something in place now over later and reviewing in 2 or 3 years when we know what the vision is within the town plan process would be the appropriate course, if that makes sense.
It does.
Okay.
Thank you, Kaylee and Chris. It makes sense, but I guess where I would challenge that, if we're at this timing about reviewing a town plan, why is it going to take 2 years? Like when we know that if the offsite levies, like what I'm hearing is kind of this predictive thing that we might have a little development boom or whatever. I think that's even more reason to bring in the developers' wisdom and insight about the town planning. And I don't understand how, and I know I'm naive. This is not my forte to plan a town, but I'm just thinking as a common sense approach that why not marry the two? Like, to me, it just seems it would be sensible.
Totally see the logic, Councillor McMillan, and either way, either path that we take, we can take either option. But we will miss opportunities. We'll miss funding opportunities. We'll miss development that we will never be able to recapture the costs associated that they're attributable to infrastructure upgrades. We'll be forced to negotiate infrastructure upgrades on a one-off basis. So if, for example, a water reservoir is needed in the Northwest, we're using lots of examples here, right? A water reservoir is needed in the Northwest. We would be put in a position to negotiate very firmly with that developer that they would have to pay for the full cost. Whereas the offsite levy aspect of things is a fair approach that doesn't attribute it to one developer in that Northwest or Northwest sector of the community. So if there was one developer that came in that wanted to proceed, they would be the ones that we would leverage really hard to build that full reservoir, and they would have to recoup those costs from other developers at a later date through different agreements. So that's where the fairness approach comes in when we are treating the developers all the same on the same playing field and the same level, is that offsite levies provides that we treat them consistently from that perspective. And that's just one example from that from that I can pull out of my head right now. And I hear you. It is like the cart before the horse. Totally get it. And it's always hard when we have these ongoing reviews of different that are concrete types of items like infrastructure versus visionary items like the town plan. And it's hard to sometimes marry them up, and sometimes those reviews of the concrete items of infrastructure have to go forward no matter what the town plan says, or what's going on with the town plan. And it is a difficult one to deal with. And I think either option is fine by us. We would prefer to see an offsite levy bylaw in place so that we capture those opportunities and we level the playing field so we don't have to negotiate and really strain our relationships with developers about negotiating for a Northwest Reservoir or a 50% contribution to the wastewater treatment plant because of development, or a new lift station somewhere else for one developer to go forward and put a halt on some development, whereas offsite levies would treat that as a fair approach, if that makes sense.
It does. So then, and I guess I'd like to hear from other council who have more experience with this than me, but I guess perhaps then could I make a friendly amendment that this is an interim agreement with a finite time so that it doesn't just, and with maybe a clause based on it will be re-reviewed when the town plan process. I just feel that the developers, I thought they had, I think in order to have balance, their voice needs to be heard, just like, and the town expertise combined.
I'll give you a perspective, Carol. The offsite levy bylaw, we started it 2017, so almost 4 years ago we started this. So, and we did that after we redid the land use bylaw. And to me, the land use bylaw is far more important than the town plan. The town plan, since I've been here, we've never opened it up to when we're looking at developments or something. We don't go back to the town plan. Maybe that's because it's not written very well or something. I don't know. We always go back to the land use bylaw. So I think that is the key one. The town plan is going to be this great big overarching thing that kind of puts a big comfy blanket over top of everything else that's in place. And I think you need the offsite levy bylaw to build the town bylaw, the town plan bylaw. That's my opinion. I don't think the town bylaw, Chris, I'm hoping that it does not take 2 years, because we've done this more than enough over all the economic dev studies and everything else. They all keep telling the same thing. If that consultant is telling us that this is going to be this long, like, I'm going to challenge that right off the start. Should be like 6 months in my mind, but that's just me. As far as the developers go, Carol, they're a profit-driven thing. They will. It doesn't matter what we put in place. They are going to challenge it at all costs. They just will. If they don't, they're probably they should be fired, because that's their job, is to come into the town of High River and work for the best interests of dream developments or lands down. Doesn't matter who it is. That's their job, to come in and challenge these things, because the lower they can get the offsite levies, the more profit the developer can make, and that's extremely important to them. The other piece is, if you don't have this in place and you start doing certain developments, I'll go back to the Hamptons, and we don't have all the pieces in place, the amount of money that it costs taxpayers in this town to balance that out and get things done properly is in the millions. And we all know how much the Hamptons has cost because of what happened back in the day, right? So, and that's a lot to do with not just the offsite levy bylaw, but holding developers' feet to the fire. So no, I'm not going to have personally, I don't have tears running out of my eyes for the developers in this. We have a level of standard in this town that I'm not interested in comparing to Crossfield or anywhere else. We are High River, and this is where we do, and we may absolutely have a higher standard of development, and we may absolutely have a little higher offsite levy bylaw, so that these projects don't come back on the existing taxpayers in this town to pay for who might come, right? That's always kind of been my thing, is why those of us that have been literally floating the boat in this town for decades and decades, and developers want to build new places. Well, why do I need to pay for that growth out there for them, right? It's a difficult thing, but I think it's, and everybody comes back as, well, it increases your tax base if you get more. Well, yes, okay. Also increases our operational costs through the roof comparatively, right? It's really tough. So that's a tough sell for me to buy in on that. So I like the way we're going through this, whether it's bang on perfect and we're going to knock it out of the park and there's not a flaw in it and the numbers are all 100% correct and it's exactly what's absolutely going to entail. You will never ever put a bylaw together that's going to give you that on this offsite levy. So I support the way it's written right now, and it's a bylaw, so it can always be adjusted as times change. And if there's something glaring that we missed, we go back and change it. So that's my thoughts on it. Anybody else? Bruce?
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. So Councillor McMillan, you invited our opinion, so I'm just going to give mine, and I also don't profess to be an expert in this area at all, which is why I heavily rely on the comments from our staff, and I they're very well trained. They've got years of experience in this area. More importantly to me, they represent High River. They represent our residents just as much as we do. And you said we should listen to the developers. We did. We had a workshop. We participated in that. They spoke. We listened to them. We considered what they said. Kaylee and Riley and everybody else listened, and Chris listened to what they said. They brought back basically a report that was not a lot changed. And I'm choosing to, one thing that I think is the only certainty in all this is that developers will never ask for a higher offsite bylaw or rate than what we're proposing. They just, they will try to. It's what they do, and I don't blame them. But I choose to trust the advice we're getting from our own people on this, and I can defend that with a very clear conscience. Thank you.
Back to Carol.
And let me clarify, this is absolutely not about an issue regarding lack of trust in administration or engineering planning. That's why you guys have the knowledge. So I just want that clarified there. What I would like to challenge though is when I hear comments like, and trust me, I understand the importance of the land use bylaw, but I think it's time that our town plan then revitalizes so that it's not just a comfy blanket that's tossed around. Let's make it an actual proper plan to guide future councils, because it's interesting as we're coming into the election year, how many more comments are thinking, oh my, this direction might change. Oh my, this direction might change. I give kudos to anyone who works in municipal government, because you've got this potential change happening every 4 years, a change of philosophy. So why can't we work towards making documents that really have good governance, that set a positive direction and a clear path about what kind of growth? Because, and I know I'm putting the rosy glasses on again, but that's just me. I just think, you know what, let's make the town plan something usable, instead of it just being out of the crypts with the dust. And I think, that's what I mean, is like, it's time, if we're doing this review, make it happen and make it sustainable, so that 4 years from now, the next council isn't saying, oh, or us, if we're not on council, saying, oh, they didn't listen. Let's work towards that for High River. I think our citizens deserve that, and the developers, so they'd have a clear idea about this is our philosophy around development. So thank you.
Well said, Councillor. I agree with you 100% on the town plan. Let's make it use something that I will open up. Councillor Nychuk.
Thanks, Mr. Snodgrass. Appreciating the train of thought, Councillor McMillan, but I'm not quite sure that the offsite levy bylaw should be or needs to be preceded by the new town plan. How am I trying to frame this? It costs to develop. We need to have some assurances on the funding for that right now. Seemingly, we've come up with the best options. When I say we, meaning the hard work that administration has done on this, with consultation with the developer. I'm thankful for their input as well. And we need something in place right now to help us facilitate moving forward. Now, if we complete a town plan in 6 months or 24 months, and it drastically changes the direction or perception of how we are moving our community forward in a built format, I trust that the council at the time and the administration at the time, which in a few years, I hope Chris is still there, that it'll be led accordingly, and that bylaw will be revisited so that it's fair. I don't think in any way, shape, or form we are trying to abuse the relationship with local developers in this. It's unfortunate. It costs money for things. And I'd rather see us have something in place right now that is reworkable and amendable if we see fit. And I think the current council administration that's here would rewind it in a heartbeat if we thought we did something untoward that wasn't in the best interest of our community. So I'd like to see us move forward with it. And always we have the understanding that we can come back to it. Just like the bylaw we're going to see in a little bit on animals and pigeons. So, you know, we're always open to coming back to it. So I really appreciate the comments, Councillor McMillan, and the concern for making it that way. But I also have trust in us as a council and administration and future councils to come, that they'll make the right decisions and make the right changes when they're appropriate for all that are involved. So just some comments, I guess. Thanks.
I appreciate that, Councillor Nychuk. My passion at the end was largely around the, let's make that town plan usable instead of it just being, because, you know, so it wasn't about lack of trust.
No further questions. I will propose the motion. Ask for a motion from Councillor Moore that council gives second reading to bylaw 4586/2020, being the offsite levies bylaw.
I will make that motion, Mayor Snodgrass.
Any further comments, discussion? I see none. All in favor? Motion is carried unanimously. Ask for a motion from Councillor Cooey that council give third and final reading to bylaw 4586/2020.
I'll give you that motion, Mayor Snodgrass.
All in favor? Motion carries. Thanks very much, Kaylee.
Thank you.
4 years. Well done. Woo. Easy one. Speaking of easy ones, pigeons.
That would be me. Thanks,
Coal,
Mayor and Council.
coal was easier.
I think you're correct. So good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm bringing forward the bylaw 4585, which is an amending animal bylaw that specifically addresses pigeon ownership in the community. I'll just highlight it a tiny bit of the background. It was about a year ago that we actually did the animal bylaw and brought that in. Since that time, we've had some communication with pigeon owners in the community, and then back on September 14th of 2020, the Calgary Racing Pigeon Association made a presentation to council advocating for pigeon ownership in the community. Administration was then directed by council to revisit the bylaw, which brings us to where we took it to first reading, and then we had a public hearing on January 25th with comments from the public and presentations from the Racing Pigeon Union and the Racing Pigeon Association out of Calgary. And just to summarize, I won't go into too much detail. The bylaw, when administration had a look at it and we finally landed on how we were going to draft this, there were 4 focus areas that we looked at, were flock size, loft size, setbacks, and licensing as are outlined in the bylaw. And just to kind of summarize, the intent of the bylaw was to try to find that balance between allowing ownership of, allowing owners, current owners and future owners to have pigeons in the community, but also to have controls in place as not to impact neighbors. And as in our research, we didn't find a lot of good guidance on that for smaller communities. And with that, I'll open it up to council for any questions or clarity that's needed.
Councillor Masterman.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass, and thank you, Peter. So just one question. If this doesn't pass, and I don't mind telling you, and I'll speak to this later, I'm not voting for it. But if this doesn't pass, what happens to all the existing pigeon operations?
Thanks, Councillor Masterman. So if this bylaw doesn't pass, we would revert back to the previous animal bylaw, or the animal bylaw that's in force. And in that bylaw, there is no ownership of pigeons. We would be contacting those owners that we've been in contact with now, and explain to them what has come about, and then start moving towards having those pigeons removed from those properties.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Councillor
Mr.
Cooey.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Councillor Cooey.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass, and thanks again, Peter. Again, another significant bylaw for our community to tackle. I'm not really a question. And please, anyone step in and clarify if I am wrong. I think there's been a lot of questions as to why this came back to the table after one decision. And I think, from my opinion, I just want to share why that happened. I think when we initially had that public hearing, and then when, shortly after the pigeon community came forward, I think we made the decision not hearing both sides of the story. And that is why it got opened up. And I think that's good governance. And I know I certainly appreciate hearing all sides of the spectrum before making a decision. So just, like I said, there's been a lot of people questioning why it came back to the table. And I think just initially, we didn't have all the information to make the best decision. Also, another thing, and Peter, please correct me if I'm wrong, because there was some conversation that pigeons were allowed prior to this bylaw. And my take on that is that they were not. Otherwise, the one owner would not have required special permission from a town manager of the day. And so whether it specifically outlined pigeons weren't allowed or not, I can't say for sure, but that was not an allowed activity in our community based on the fact they needed special permission. So if I'm wrong, please correct me.
No, that's thanks, Councillor Cooey. That's correct. Our previous animal bylaw, prior to the one that was done a year ago, along with the one that was done a year ago, both of them did not allow pigeon ownership in the community. The previous one didn't actually have a mechanism to enforce it, though. So although you weren't allowed to have pigeons, we really didn't have a strong mechanism to enforce it. And then that's when, at that time, we only were aware of the one owner of pigeons in the community, and that particular owner sought out permission and was granted by the town manager at the time, but only in the interim till we brought forward the animal bylaw.
Thanks, Peter.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass, and thank you very much, Peter, and your team, Jessica and Angie. I know that you have done a lot of work about this. And alluding to what Councillor Cooey said, first of all, I want to thank everyone for their feedback, because this has been a very interactive situation where there's been lots of feedback from the public. And because when I reflect back on the original public hearing, when we heard from one person about a concern, it just felt kind of more informative to have the other side, as well as for me, I viewed it as a great example of the power of democracy, that instead of people complaining about a bylaw not going out in their favor, that they actually took the steps towards expressing the viewpoint. And in doing so, we actually even received even more feedback from the public revisiting this. Let's see. Now, I guess if we're discussing how we're thinking about this, is I think the way I'm looking at this is about compromise. I think that the work that Peter and his team have done about the compromise of 10 pigeons, I know a lot of people are not in favor, and they referred to this being against the good neighbor bylaw, but I guess I see things a little bit differently about being a vibrant community and a welcoming community, as long as the pigeons are licensed and the rules are followed. I've had some people express concerns to me where they feel, and this is where clarity about that this is just about keeping urban pigeons, because I've had some people comment to me that they're looking forward to having all of the pigeons in town eliminated. And I said, this is not a pigeon cull. Like, if this bylaw doesn't, if this amendment doesn't go through, it doesn't mean that every pigeon is going to be destroyed in High River, correct, Peter?
That is correct.
And then additionally, I've done a bit of research about pigeons, and I have to say, and this was just fortuitous timing, but I highly recommend the book, The Bird's Way, because it was very interesting, because believe it or not, birds have densely neurons in their brains to be the same amount as a gorilla. So go figure. And so just a little bit of interesting about their intelligence. I'm when I was reading through everyone's comments, and this is the most difficult part because everyone is making logical sense on both sides of the equation. But when I was doing research about pigeons and disease, I couldn't find stats about admissions to the High River Hospital based on pigeon disease. I myself have a lot of bird feeders in my yard that ultimately not only attract birds, but also cats that are off leash. And so I clean up excrement in my yard, and I know the pigeons do structural damage and whatnot. But I guess I think for me, when we're talking about disease, and we're all walking petri dishes, this is part of an ecosystem that we all can transmit diseases. And I think I'm kind of leading with my heart, because months and months ago, when I really appreciated that our CAO, Chris Prosser, met with the people who came up with the first concern about how can we as the pigeon people have our voice heard, and they were running through the process about, because I had been, sorry if I'm rambling, but the Mr. Tabaldos had contacted me about how to go about this, and I said, you know, it's not impossible for a bylaw to be reviewed. But through that conversation, when Chris reported back to us, I was quite touched with the fact that Mr. Tabaldos has a child who's disabled and in a wheelchair. And I know it might not sound logical, but I'm voting with my heart for this one, because I couldn't help but think, first of all, how as parents, we advocate so hard for our children to begin with. But when I think how I've got the luxury to clean up my deck, and every day when I wake up, the first thing I'm grateful for is my ability to be mobile, I couldn't help but think that, you know what, and to have a compromise of like not tons of pigeons, but 10, if that brought joy into my disabled child's life, I would advocate to have that bylaw amended. So I am voting with my heart, no matter how illogical it might seem. Thank you.
Councillor Masterman. Thanks, Carol.
Thanks, Councillor McMillan. We actually didn't get any evidence at the public hearing of that. We heard that from Chris early in the process, but we've heard from pigeon people at least twice, and neither one of them that I recall talked about that. But to me, it's and I'm going to come across very cold here based on what you just said. about your heart, it's going to appear that I don't have one. We've spent a ton of time on this. Administration has spent a lot of time on this. We sent it back to them for another look. We've talked about this. We've talked to Pigeon people. To me, it still boils down to the fact that not one of the Pigeon people in town got permission to do what they're doing. This is, I don't mind spending a lot of time on a legitimate issue. To me, this is not a legitimate issue because we're talking about illegitimate operations. And it seems like we've been trying to almost bend over backwards to accommodate these illegitimate operations. And I'm sorry, no, I'm not sorry. When you move into a town and you do something like decide to raise pigeons, I don't care who you are or where you're from, it just makes sense. You find out what the rules are. You know, I guess I can just do this. I guess I can just, no, you can't. You know, we deal with this every day. Peter's department deals with it every day. The town deals with it every day. It just bugs me that all these people and as far as compromise goes, you know, we mentioned to them last time, so what about 10 birds per household? That didn't make sense to them. That wasn't workable because these flocks, you know, they have birthing times and there's lots of little ones and how would we even begin to enforce 10 birds? Like how would we even begin to enforce it? There's flocks of 50 birds that people have videotaped and sent us the videotape of up to 50 birds. I counted them. I stopped the action and I counted the birds. And like, that's how big these operations are. And there's anywhere from 8 or 9 or 6 or 7. And I just, you know, I'm just thinking, somebody said, one of the people I believe in the public survey said, well, you allow chickens already, why not pigeons? And there's a huge difference. Chickens stay put. They're in coops. They don't fly around. Our rules say they have to be in coops. You're allowed 3 hens per household. They don't fly around. You don't have 50 of them flying around neighborhoods and pooping and sitting there cooing and like, I'm sorry, I just don't understand why I could see spending this much time on an issue if it was going to benefit High River. I do not see how this benefits the greater High River. We have heard far more opposition than we have to pigeons than we have to support. And so I'm sorry, I'm out on this completely. I just couldn't begin to support this. So thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I think when we took another look at this, it was so that we could adjust and put restrictions on racing pigeon operation. But I think that there's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of misinformation out there about pigeons in general. And yeah, we're all experiencing some kind of, I hate that sound, coo sound across the neighborhood and things like that. But it's something that it's a there just seems to be a lot of misinformation on the difference between wild pigeons and racing pigeons raised in an operation. I guess it boils down to a basic question that I got, and maybe Peter could give me an opinion on this, is, do you think that if we pass this bylaw, that there would be any less pigeons in High River? If we went in and enforced the non-pigeon operations, would there be less pigeons in High River, and would there be less problems with people in a High River that are experiencing problems with pigeons in general?
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Yeah, I do believe that with the restrictions we've put in place, that it's our understanding for some of the current pigeon owners that we're looking at 50, maybe 60 pigeons that they have. We do believe that although it will be a hard one to enforce, it just takes a little more investigation. I shouldn't say harder, it's just a little more investigation, a bit more time. By reducing the numbers, and this is why we brought the recommendation forward, is by limiting the numbers to 10 and knowing that we do have several pigeon enthusiasts and owners in our community as compared to maybe other communities. By reducing that number, we'll also have reduce the impact. Our hope is it'll have reduce the impact. But even at that, if and this has been well articulated by the pigeon owners associations and union, is the owners of pigeons have a responsibility as well. So if your pigeons are impacting your neighbors, then you still have a responsibility, and it's still covered in the animal bylaw that if you're impacting your neighbor, then we will need to address it at that time. But the intent of this bylaw was to put in those parameters that would probably allow and help mitigate those impacts on owners, or on neighbors and others in the community, but still allow enthusiasts to still continue on with their hobby, although it's with less birds and probably smaller lofts and so on.
I'm sorry, Peter, I probably didn't make myself clear enough with the question. It's my actual question was that there is, I think there is a massive amount of wild pigeons in High River compared to the ones that are raised for racing by the pigeon enthusiasts. So there is still going to be a massive pigeon problem, even if we didn't allow pigeon operations. So by putting in by not putting in this bylaw and not allowing pigeon racing, I personally don't feel it's going to make any darn difference at all.
Right. Yeah. As far as wild pigeons or feral pigeons in the community, I'm not aware of any significant issues. But it, as far as what we do for this amending animal bylaw and pigeon ownership, I think the wild pigeons, although wild pigeons can be attracted to the lofts and the feeding and and so on of pigeon owners, I don't think we'll see a significant change in wild pigeons in the community.
Thank you.
Councillor Masterman.
I'm sorry, Mayor Snodgrass, just very quickly. We can't do anything about the feral pigeons legally in town. But it just stands to reason that if you've got 8 or 9 or however many there are with up to 50 birds each, and suddenly we don't have them, and they're in residential areas, these the racing ones, they're beside people that don't like them there. They fly over houses nearby. The feral pigeons are not in residential neighborhoods like this. So it stands to reason that if we lose several hundred tame racing pigeons, then yes, we will have fewer pigeons in High River, period.
Councillor Cooey.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. I guess just a little bit further to Councillor Moore's comment. You're right. We still are going to, as Bruce said, Councillor Masterman said, we're still going to have feral pigeons. I have neighbors putting spikes on their chimneys and their roofs to try and stop them from roosting and hanging around. I know if I'm in my basement and there's one on my chimney pipe, I can hear the cooing all the way down in my basement. But I guess where the problem is when that flock is flying around that particular neighborhood and the neighbors that are impacted there. When I think of someone sitting in their backyard, I know one of the coops that I've walked by before, you can hear the cooing. So if I have a barking dog beside me, I can call the neighbor, talk to the neighbor, they can put it in the house. You can't take away that cooing neighbor. And you know, that might be appealing to some that might be not. And I appreciate Councillor McMillan's comments because it has been hard. I've had to take that part of the conversation out of this and not think about it on a personal level because this needs to be for the greater good of our community. And I fear that this pits neighbors against neighbors. Again, the cat issue is a cat issue, and that's one I'm not sure there's a simple issue to, but this is one I think where it would just create far more angst in communities than by not allowing them would.
Councillor Kinghorn.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I'll chime in here a bit. This one's probably, I thought, put more hours into this one than some of the other stuff we do, as Councillor Masterman has said. For me, it's about a density issue, really, in that we've got a relatively small community over there that's about a block of homes. And I believe I counted 8 or 9 actual coops in that area. So even if we're limiting it to 10 per coop, you're going to have whatever it is, 60 or 70 birds flying around in that small little neighborhood over there. There is a pigeon problem in High River. You can just talk to Irene over at the museum and the amount of work she's had to do to try and get rid of those birds from over there. I'm not in favor of any pigeons. I'm sorry.
Okie dokie. Pigeons. So number one, the disease thing that's been brought up in the past. To me, that's just a fear-mongering tactic that's been used. When we had elevators in town, I don't remember there being mass human deaths because of the disease that all the pigeons brought in. Back then, we had a lot of pigeons. Personally, I do not see, regardless of what's happening at the museum, I do not see a massive pigeon problem in High River. I don't have any pigeons at my house. We got a couple of resident doves, and I guess they could be called pigeons, but they're definitely not. They're definitely doves in my mind, not pigeons. But as far as, you know, Carol, you bring up the the good point regarding the one family with, you know, these pigeons being compassionate care. And there are other ways to provide that too. We do have a chicken bylaw, and the chickens have been told they're doing the same thing for others. In fact, our bee bylaw, the one family I know, the bees provide that to one of the kids. So there's other ways to provide that as well. And I look at this 100%, a lot to do with the good neighbor bylaw and what we're doing, because these coops absolutely do impact neighbors. There's just no question. When the videos that were sent to us, there's just no question there. So I don't see any other hands up. I got to find the actual resolutions in the midst of all my notes and scribbling. So I'm going to separate these two. We'll do this for the second reading first. And when you vote, please raise your hand so that I can see it, because it will be a mixed vote on this one for sure. So I'll ask for a motion from Councillor Kinghorn that council gives second reading to bylaw 4585/2020, being the amendment to the animal control bylaw.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I'll give you that motion.
Okay. Those in favor? Opposed? Vote is 6-1. The motion is defeated. No need to carry to third reading. Thank you very much. Thanks, Peter. That's a lot of work going back on that one. So it's all done. We'll move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Red tape reduction. Don't even get me started.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I guess just this is a grant requirement for our grant that we have for replacing the curling and small ice arena slab. In the report, we identify some work we have done within the last year, and then identified some initiatives that we are moving forward in the next year. These are all initiatives the town had underway already, so there is no budget impact. It's basically just reporting on them. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Carol, sorry.
Thank you. I was going to tease you that just because I voted for pigeons, now I'm not acknowledged. And I want you guys to know I respect your decision. I really do. Thank you, Riley. I just wanted to, I was wondering on page 348 under streamline processes B, in the other box, because we don't have the full, I just was wondering if you could give us what the full detail is, because it's cut off, because we don't have the ability to.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I got cut off. I can open the original.
If you don't mind, please.
Oh, sorry, I don't have it. It'd be by processing time. So essentially, by standardizing, historically, our offsite levies are on a agreement by agreement basis. By standardizing that collection method, like Kaylee was talking about earlier, to that 10-45-45. It's a standard process. There's no negotiation. It goes into the agreement, and should move the process forward a lot easier, rather than having to stop, figure out how you're collecting it, what are the triggers, and then all that, the time afterwards to do that.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
No further questions. Thanks, Riley. Letter from West Winds. Speaking of that one. Nobody?
There's no one speaking to that.
Okay. And the letter from
Mayor
Bonnyville.
Snodgrass.
Go ahead, Carol. I knew you'd probably jump in, so.
Sorry. So what I was wondering about with this particular item, because there had been a little bit of confusion about who received the letter and when, I was wondering if there would be a possibility that we could put this as an actual agenda item for a meeting, and where we could have Loren and possibly Marilyn speak to it if you're wanting more information, because it is a funding request.
Carol? Bring him in as a delegation and then have a.
We can certainly do that if that's how council wishes to proceed.
Is that okay with council? I'm getting nods. Please proceed.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. And I'm trying to find. For the next one. Letter from MD of Bonnyville, re-FCM. Anything we need to do there, Kara? I'm trying to bring that thing back up. Oh, there we are. Can you speak to that just for a second, Kara?
Sure. So the MD of Bonnyville is looking for municipalities to weigh in on whether they feel that we're being adequately represented to FCM. And they had specific questions laid out in the letter, which we can go through if you'd like me to pull that up.
I got them right here. Do you feel that FCM advocates for the needs of your municipality or Western Canada? No. Does the annual FCM conference agenda tours provide relevant value for your municipality? No. Are the needs of Western Canada different than those of Eastern Canada? And if so, is the time we entertain the idea of WCM, Western Canada municipalities? I'm just like, wax it. Muni Wexit. No, I'm not in favor of that one, but I don't know. Give me your thoughts, Carol.
Thank you very much, Mayor Snodgrass. I have to say that I took exception to the second last paragraph. I didn't experience genuine alienation and hostility representing High River at FCM in Quebec City. It was, and I intentionally sat with people from the East. And what I learned at FCM, we all have the same problems. And I learned a lot from the people from the East Coast. And also they learned a lot, and Councillor Kinghorn can speak to it too, but they learned a lot about the challenges of the West and not realizing that, you know what, we're all in this together. And so what was ironic, because we had the name tags, you know, where your province is on. I'll tell you who expressed the most hostility when they'd get into the elevator and look at your tag. Manitoba. Manitoba was totally against Alberta, and they were quick to tell you why. Those were very long elevator rides listening to how bad we were. So, and that the whole experience I found very invaluable to share about High River to people, because people in Newfoundland were very interested in our little town, and we learned so much from there. So that's just my speak to it. I was kind of offended by that, because I thought they're saying some harsh words here, and I didn't experience any hostility at all.
And I'm not kidding when I'm talking about this is a Wex City style letter, right? I don't like it, and you know, maybe this council may very well be on the separatist side of things. I am absolutely not. I don't want anything to do with any of these parties, whether it's the Wild Rose Independents or the you know, when we're talking government parties, or the Maverick Party. Catchy name. But I don't want anything to do with that separatist stuff. And I think doing things like this only fuels the fire. It doesn't improve anything. So I'm getting the looks on the screen that we are not in favor of supporting anything to do with this letter. Thank you very much. Letter of support request. Tell us. It might be a different opinion now, but Chris, do you want to just do a brief or what this is?
Mayor Snodgrass and the rest of council, we received this request. We felt it fit well within the letter of support request and the new policy, as it is trying to enhance broadband service, not just to High River but to the surrounding area as well through their cellular network. While there's this grant program that is funded for rural areas, High River was not one of the selected communities to be on their mapping from the federal government for this broadband initiative. So we have not submitted an application. Nor do we plan to at this point in time. So this is a roundabout way, I guess, to see if there is a way to enhance service within the community through 5G broadband kind of service. We felt we felt the request needed to be seen by council, and council make a decision on that request, whether or not to support a private corporation or not.
Councillor Nychuk.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. I'll support a letter as long as we have a guarantee that the $125,016.47 are going to be spent in High River. Because I think TELUS is pumping letters like this out there for supportive funding from a government program. And I'm not quite convinced that they're going to end up spending it in our community. So that's my 2 cents on the request.
Good point. Councillor Masterman?
Nope.
Any other feelings you'd like to share?
I have many feelings, but I don't think I'll share them right now. Thank you.
Appreciate it. I'd like to get done tonight. Thanks. So I'm getting a no on that one?
May I just ask a quick question?
You bet.
Is this becoming more common practice that businesses, like even for-profit businesses, are needing, in order to apply for grants, that they need municipality letters of support?
You know, Carol, I honestly don't think they need it. I think they come and get it. They just kind of want it, because if they can attach the municipality's name to it, you know, maybe it does hold weight somewhere, but I don't know that it's part of the actual application process that you need. Chris is shaking his head, so my assumptions are right that it, yeah, I don't think it's an actual box you got to check off. It's just they want to come here and kind of guilt you into doing it, and then they've got the town of High River as a supporter for their grant, right? So,
right. Thanks.
For-profit corporation that we've already drawn boundaries on. Councillor Cooey.
I was just reading the chat box, and there was a chat noting that we kind of already meet this standard. So High River probably isn't a community that qualifies. If I'm reading the chat correctly, somebody can, so we don't qualify. I guess my question was going to be, before I saw that, I know there's a little bit of history here, but just a little devil's advocate, because I'm reluctant to sign it as well. But going forward with future relations with TELUS, is there any benefit in signing the letter?
No.
Regardless of our relationship, TELUS is going to come in here when it looks profitable to them to do so. Period. Or when we bend over backwards and give them everything for free so that they come in, one or the other. So that's been the history we know very, very well with TELUS. So wish them all the luck in the world. Letter of support. Kara, is that coming back for motion, or we don't really need to? Or
it's here if council wants to make the decision based on the delegation. If they want to defer it, that's certainly council's prerogative as well. But we had the information, so we wanted to attach it to the agenda.
I just need to have a quick look at it again. Carol?
Thank you. Yes, I was just wondering, I think I'm in favor of the letter of support. I just think we need to definitely rework it so that it sounds like it's coming from mayor and council, but also because the part that I've got some concern about is if you are interested in lending your support in our endorsement and approve of it, please accept our sincere gratitude. That shouldn't be coming from us as the municipality. We look forward to hearing a promising response soon. Should you have any queries to discuss, please feel to call us. No, because it should just be a standard, we're giving the support so that this business in High River can offer the 24-hour care, because that's part of their grant requirement for their service. But it's, and even this is a goodwill gesture to the company we have great corporation relations with for decades. And no, it should just be our standard, this is a letter of support. The proper professional verbiage, because in principle I support it, but just not how this particular template is.
I agree. The wording needs to be adjusted. Hey, Kara, I think we can all agree on that, if just as a support piece. Bruce, sorry.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. So I guess I was still a little confused, and I should have asked Julia directly. I understand that this one aspect of their center is nonprofit, but is the center itself, is her business, is she in the business to not make a profit? Like, is she a nonprofit? And I'm just confused about that, because because that will help me decide how I want to vote on this.
So what I had kind of understood her to say was that there's one piece that's for profit of the business, and then there's one piece that's nonprofit. I'm not exactly sure how it's set up in terms of the details around that, but she did say that this request is coming under the nonprofit side, because that was our concern as well when we initially received this. And so, yeah, I acknowledge and I totally get where you're coming from.
Okay, thank you.
Kara, is it possible, like, you can follow up with Julia, but I would think that there would be a different business name to each entity. There would have to be tax purposes and stuff. You can't run the same. I don't think you could run a profit and non-profit under the same business name or business number or anything. So, because I think that's what, I'm reluctant to put in the Daydreams ELCC Limited. It sounds like corporation. Well, it doesn't sound like, it means it is. So where's the nonprofit name or number, right? We need to find that so that the letter's clear as to keep in line with our bylaw. Please.
Absolutely.
Bruce again.
Sorry, I didn't know my hand was still up.
Okay, Carol again.
Thank you. And I agree, clarification would be good. My understanding through researching, I think I thought they had to be a nonprofit in order to even have that $25 a day, like they had to meet some parameters, correct? Because the for-profit childcare centers aren't eligible for that $25 a day. That was my understanding. Where I think the for-profit part is, just like what Julia said, is for the out of school, like out of that actual physical building, the places at the High River United Church and Spitzy, those would be the profit component, because they're not eligible for the $25 a day funding. Like those parents that are utilizing those programs aren't eligible. So that's my understanding, that the business side that's right in that actual physical building is nonprofit.
So Kara, actually, when I leave this, the letter itself just has Daydreams ELCC Limited in it. In my script for the meeting today, you've got letter of support requests, Daydreams ELCC Limited and Daydreams and Sunbeams Early Learning Center. So I think the Daydreams and Sunbeams Early Learning Center, OSC, must be the nonprofit portion of this, and that's what needs to go into the letter. So just confirm that with Julia where we're at and bring back some wording that fits us a little bit better. Okay, cool. Other questions, council? Correspondence? A little bit nervous when I saw the one interview with Ryan Jesperson. I was a little nervous to open that one up, but it was positive, so wipe the sweat off my brow there. Anything else? Meeting adjourned 4:55. Thank you very much. Take care.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.